The phone ripped Leo Maxwell from a fitful sleep, the jarring ring slicing through the stale, beer-soaked air of his apartment. He fumbled for it on the nightstand, knocking over a stack of horse racing forms in the process. The digital clock glared 3:17 a.m. He groaned and squinted at the caller ID, unknown number, probably another wrong number. Or worse, another debt collector. Yeah, he rasped, voice thick with sleep and regret. Mr. Maxwell. Leo Maxwell. The voice was thin, tight with barely suppressed panic. Speaking. It is Simon LeBeau, Jacques. Jacques hasn't checked in. He was supposed to call 3 hours ago. Always calls, always. Leo's brain hadn't quite engaged yet. Jacques LeBeau was a client, a recent one, and a lucrative one at that. LeBeau owned several properties in the French Quarter and Garden District, rented them out as lavish vacation rentals. Leo's firm, Maxwell Investigations, handled security checks, making sure the properties were empty between guests, investigating any complaints. Simple stuff. Good money. Checked in with who? Madame LeBeau. Leo asked, trying to sound professional even as exhaustion gnawed at him. With you. He always calls you after he does a final walkthrough. Says it is just procedure. He was at the Cypress Street property, getting it ready for the Henderson family tomorrow. That was the last thing he said. Said he'd de-call once it was secure. Leo sat up, pushing the racing forms onto the floor. His small apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of his escalating debts. Losing LeBeau's business would be significant. Has he missed check-ins before? Never, not even a minute. He is meticulous, Mr. Maxwell, and he wouldn't just disappear. Her voice cracked on the last word. Okay, Madame LeBeau, I'll head over to the Cypress Street property now. I'll check it out, see if I can locate him. Try not to worry. A lie, but a necessary one. He needed to reassure her, buy himself time to assess the situation. Worry was exactly what he expected. Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Please find him. The office was a disaster zone. Files overflowed from every surface. Teetering stacks threatening to avalanche with the slightest tremor. Empty coffee cups formed a fragile ecosystem on his desk, mingling with crumpled betting slips and unpaid bills. Rain lashed against the window, mirroring the tempest brewing in Leo's gut. He ignored the chaos, focusing on the digital scan of LeBeau's file. Jacques LeBeau, 58 years old, self-made millionaire property magnate. A reserved man, according to Simone, preferring the company of his books to large social gatherings. No known enemies, no obvious vulnerabilities. Yet, something about Simone's frantic urgency had set off alarms in Leo's experience. People didn't just to vanish, especially not meticulous routine. Driven men like Jacques LeBeau. Leo ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. A wave of nausea washed over him as he glanced at the red numbers staring back at him from his bank statement on the computer screen. He was dangerously close to the edge. Big Tony Calogero wasn't known for his patience. He needed this case. He needed Don LeBeau. He grabbed his worn leather jacket and headed out, the city a blur of gray in the pre-dawn light. The LeBeau residence on Cypress Street was a grand 3-story mansion, a stark contrast to Leo's cramped apartment. Wrought iron balconies dripped with rainwater, overlooking a meticulously manicured garden. It reeked of old money and quiet secrets. The house felt still, too still. Simone had provided the key. Leo let himself in, the heavy oak door closing behind him with a solemn thud. He walked through the opulent foyer, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and dust, as if the house itself hadn't been disturbed in days. Mr. LeBeau. Leo called out, his voice sounding hollow in the vast emptiness. Silence. He systematically worked his way through the house, checking each room, the living room, with its antique furniture and priceless artwork, the dining room set for a meal that would never be eaten, the kitchen impeccably clean as if a maid had just finished her duties. No sign of a struggle, no indication of forced entry. Everything was exactly as it should be, and yet wrong. He found nothing amiss in the rental unit either. A fully furnished two-bedroom brimming with tasteful, expensive decor. Everything was in order, eerily so. The final walk-through checklist was completed, signed and dated. LeBeau had been here. Recently, it was in LeBeau's study that Leo finally noticed something that didn't fit. The study was a book lover, as sanctuary floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with leather, bound volumes, a large mahogany desk, and a comfortable armchair positioned near a crackling fireplace. It also felt violently ignored, unlike the rest of the pristine house. Books were pulled haphazardly from shelves and piled onto the desk, pages dog-eared and marked with frantic scribbles. Leo ran a hand over the spines, pausing at a first edition of Baudelaire Sile's Floors, Du Mal He. Pulled it from the shelf, noticing an odd stiffness in the binding inside. Tucked between the brittle pages was a small, folded note yellowed with age. The writing was small, precise, almost calligraphic. It wasn't T-English or French. It looked coded, a series of symbols, numbers, and short phrases arranged in a complex pattern. Leo recognized a few alchemical symbols and a series of nautical flags. He had seen enough during his short stint in the Marines to recognize the hallmarks of a complex cipher. He carefully placed the note in an evidence bag. A prickle of unease crawling up his spine. This wasn't a simple disappearance. This wasn't a man who decided to skip town. This felt deliberate, orchestrated. This was something far more complicated. The scent of cheap cologne and stale cigars hit Leo before he even saw Big Tony Calogero. Tony stood in the doorway of Leo's office, flanked by two men who looked as if they hadn't smiled in decades. The rain plastered Tony, slick back hair to his scalp, emphasizing the predatory gleam in his eyes. Maxwell, Tony greeted, his voice a low rumble. Heard you were out and about. Busy, busy, busy. I like that. A man gotta hustle. Leo forced a smile. Just keeping things moving, Tony. That is good, real good. 'Cause hustle is what I expect, especially from folks who owe me money. Tony stepped further into the cramped office, ignoring the piles of paperwork. One of his goons began to casually survey the room, his gaze lingering on the half-empty bottle of bourbon on Leo's desk. I am working on it, Tony. I told you, I am close to a big payout. Tony chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver down Leo's spine. Payouts, everyone. Has got a story about a payout. I prefer guarantees, Leo. I prefer seeing green, and right now I am seeing a lot of red. I have a new case, Leo offered, trying to deflect. A high-profile client should be good for a substantial fee. Tony's eyes narrowed. Oh yeah, what kind of case? Lost cat, cheating spouse, disappearance. A Jacques LeBeau, wealthy businessman. I am investigating. Leo decided to stretch the truth a little. It is a sensitive case, could be big. Tony considered this, his expression unreadable. LeBeau, huh? I know the name, involved in some import-to-export business, I heard. Shady stuff. You be careful with that one, Leo. Some folks don't too like their business scrutinized. He paused, leaning in close. And you better not forget about 2 and 20 business. While you are running around playing detective, my patience is wearing thin. He reached out and squeezed Leo's shoulder. His grip like a vice. I want my money, Maxwell, by the end of the week, or things are going to get unpleasant. He gave Leo a knowing smirk and turned to leave, his goons flanking him. Oh, and one more thing, Tony said, stopping at the door. Stay away from the waterfront. Understand, Leo? His heart hammered against his ribs. He watched Tony disappear into the rain, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. The coded note, the vanishing act, the veiled threats. It was all coming together in a way he didn't like, a way that smelled like trouble. And he had a sinking feeling that Jacques LeBeau hadn't simply disappeared. He'd been taken, and Leo, whether he liked it or not, was right in the middle of it. He looked down at the evidence bag containing the coded note. The symbols seemed to swim before his eyes, a cryptic message from a man who might already be dead. The feeling that something was terribly wrong settled over him like a shroud. He needed to decipher this code and fast, but the sinking feeling remained, An unnerving certainty that whatever he was about to uncover would drag him into something far deeper thither to him, and far more dangerous to him than he'd ever imagined. The rain had finally stopped, leaving a slick sheen on the cobblestone streets of the French Quarter. A heavy, humid air hung over everything, thick with the scent of jasmine and decay. Leo needed a specialist, someone who could make sense of the coded note. And there was only one man he trusted, a ghost from his past. Old Man Tiber. Tiber lived above a dusty curio shop on Royal Street, surrounded by forgotten treasures and the ghosts of stories untold. The air inside was thick with the smell of aged paper and pipe tobacco. Tiber, a retired army cryptographer, was a wiry man with eyes that had seen too much and a mind that hadn't forgotten a single detail. Maxwell, Tiber greeted. Without looking up from the chessboard he was meticulously studying. Didn't think I'd see your face around here again? Still chasing shadows? Something like that, Leo said, handing over the evidence bag. Found this in Jacques LeBeau's study. He has gone missing. Wife hired me to find him. Tiber took the bag, his gnarled fingers carefully extracting the note. He put on a pair of spectacles perched on his nose and examined the symbols with a practiced eye. Intriguing. Not a standard cipher, looks like a polyalphabetic substitution, layered with some esoteric elements. Alchemical symbols, nautical flags, whoever created this wanted to make sure it wasn't easily cracked. How long will it take? Leo asked, impatient. Every minute felt like a step closer to disaster. Time is fluid, my boy, depends on the complexity. This is a layered puzzle, give me a few hours. But I will tell you this, the creator knew what they were doing. This isn't the work of an amateur. Leo left Tiber to his work, a growing unease settling over him. He wandered aimlessly through the quarter, the crowds of tourists and street performers feeling distant and unreal. He needed something to occupy his mind, anything to push back the creeping dread. Hours later, Tiber called. Maxwell, I have something. The code, it is not about suving what is said, but suving where it points. The symbols correspond to locations, landmarks throughout the city. Old New Orleans, and not the tourist traps, the forgotten places. Tiber rattled off a series of names to Marie Laveau, House of Voodoo, the old Ursuline convent, a crumbling crypt in St. Louis Cemetery number 1. These aren't random, Maxwell. They significant sites steeped in history and legend, in voodoo. There is a pattern here, a path. A path to what? Leo asked, his voice tight. I don't know. But it feels old dangerous. This isn't about money. Maxwell, this is about something buried, something someone wants to keep hidden. The memory slammed into Leo like a physical blow. A dusty motel room in Mississippi, rain lashing against the windows, a young woman barely more than a girl pleading with him. Sarah, he'd been a young, ambitious bondsman back then. Eager to prove himself, Sarah's husband, a small-time drug dealer, had skipped bail. She begged Leo to find him, fearing for his life. He promised he would. He hadn't. He followed the trail, but the fugitive had vanished into the bayou, swallowed by the murky water and the shadows. Weeks later, they found the man's body, floating face down in the river. The case had haunted him ever since, a constant reminder of his failure, of the promises he couldn't keep. He vowed never to let a case get that far again, never to underestimate the darkness lurking beneath the surface. He rubbed his temples, fighting off the flashback. This wasn't about Sarah. This was about Jacques LeBeau. But the memory served as a stark warning. Underestimate this case, and someone could get hurt badly. Heard you were sniffing around, Maxwell. Leo turned to find slick Rick DeMarco leaning against the doorway of his office, a smug grin plastered on his face. Rick was everything Leo wasn't: polished, successful, and utterly ruthless. He ran the largest bail bond business in New Orleans, and he didn't hesitate to use any means necessary to get what he wanted. DeMarco, Leo said, his voice flat. What do you want? Just checking in on my favorite struggling competitor. Business slow. You look a little pale, Leo. Maybe you should consider selling those bonds of yours. I am feeling generous. I'll give you 20 cents on the dollar, Leo. S jaw tightened. 20 cents. A blatant insult? I am not selling. Suit yourself. Just thought I'd offer a lifeline. You are drowning, Maxwell, and frankly, you are not worth the trouble of watching you go under. Rick paused, his gaze lingering on the chaotic state of the office. Heard you picked up the LeBeau's case, funny. That name's been floating around. Seems our friend Jacques had a complicated life. What do you know about it? Leo asked, his suspicions rising. Rick shrugged. Just whispers, rumors apparently. LeBeau's wasn't he just renting out pretty houses. He was moving things, valuable things. Things that shouldn't be moved. What things? Rick chuckled. Now, why would I tell you that? Just a friendly warning. Leo, stay out of deep water. Some currents are stronger than you think. He pushed himself off the doorframe and walked away, leaving Leo seething with frustration. Driven by DeMarco's cryptic comment and the deciphered coordinates from Tiber, Leo found himself back at the LeBeau's mansion. He focused on the study, knowing there had to be something he missed. He ran his hands along the bookshelves, meticulously examining each volume. His fingers brushed against a slight irregularity in the spine of a large antique atlas. It felt hollow. He pressed gently, and a section of the bookshelf slid inward with a soft click, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a tarnished silver key, intricately crafted with a serpentine design, and beside it a single, dried magnolia blossom, its delicate petals brittle with age. The key was old, undeniably antique. The magnolia blossom, a symbol of dignity and allure, felt intentional. A message, a clue. He picked them up, turning them over in his hands, a growing sense of dread washing over him. LeBeau's hadn't just disappeared. He vanished into a world of secrets, of hidden histories, of dangerous obsessions. And Leo Maxwell, against his better judgment, had just walked right into the heart of it. He felt a chill crawl down his spine. This was no longer a simple missing person's case. This was something far, far worse. The serpentine key felt cold and heavy in Leo's palm. It was unlike anything he'd encountered before, an intricate piece of craftsmanship suggesting wealth and secrets. He spent hours researching local locksmiths, antique dealers, even historical societies, but no one recognized the design. Finally, a grizzled old man at a hardware store on Magazine Street had suggested it might be for an older model storage unit lock. The kind they used to have back in the 70s, 80s, the man had said, squinting at the key. A lot of those old places are still out by the industrial docks. Worth a look. Maybe. The storage facility was a labyrinth of corrugated metal and peeling paint, located on the outskirts of the city, bordering the marshlands. Rain threatened again, the sky a bruised purple. The manager, a bored-looking teenager with purple hair, barely glanced at Leo's ID as he signed the rental agreement, using LeBeau's name, of course. The unit number discreetly etched onto the key was 312. The lock clicked open with a groan, releasing a musty odor that smelled of dust, dampness, and something else, something vaguely chemical. Leo pushed open the heavy metal door, and his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't tea furniture, or family heirlooms, or forgotten belongings that filled the unit. It was art, hundreds of paintings, stacked haphazardly against the walls, covered in plastic sheeting. But these weren't originals. Leo, despite his lack of art expertise, could recognize a forgery when he saw one. Copies of Renoir's, Monet's, Degas' masterpieces reproduced with unsettling accuracy. He moved deeper into the unit, his hand instinctively reaching for the Glock he carried, concealed in a shoulder holster. The air grew heavier, more oppressive. Scattered amongst the paintings were stacks of documents, invoices, shipping manifests, letters of authentication, all forged, expertly done, but undeniably fake. The documents pointed to a complex network of shell corporations and offshore accounts, hinting at a large-scale art fraud operation. LeBeau's hadn't just been a property magnate. He'd been a high-level player in something far more dangerous, and someone had gone to great lengths to hide it. The rain started as Leo left the storage facility, fat droplets splattering against his windshield. He glanced in his rearview mirror. A dark sedan was tailing him, keeping a steady distance. He noticed it a few blocks back, but dismissed it as coincidence. Now, he wasn't so sure. He picked up speed, weaving through the afternoon traffic. The sedan stayed on his tail, relentlessly pursuing him. He ran a yellow light, narrowly avoiding a collision with a delivery truck. He risked a glance in the mirror again and saw the sedan accelerate, attempting to box him in. He slammed on the brakes, swerving into a side street, barely missing a parked car. He heard the screech of tires behind him, followed by a sickening crunch of metal. He looked back to see the sedan had clipped the rear of his vehicle, sending sparks flying. The driver didn't T-stop, accelerating away into the rain. Leo's heart hammered in his chest. This wasn't just about a missing person anymore. Someone wanted him off the case, and they weren't afraid to use violence to achieve their goal. He started with Simone LeBeau, but she offered nothing beyond grief and worry. She claimed to know nothing about her husband's business dealings, insisting he was a simple investor. Her story felt rehearsed, too perfect. Next, he tracked down LeBeau's business partner, a slick lawyer named Julian Devereaux. Devereaux was all charm and evasion, smoothly deflecting Leo's questions with practiced ease. He admitted LeBeau was involved in collecting art, but dismissed the idea of forgery as ludicrous. Jacques had exquisite taste, Devereaux said, sipping from a crystal glass of scotch. He was a connoisseur, a patron of the arts. He wouldn't be caught dead dealing in fakes. Leo didn't believe him. Devereaux' eyes darted around the room as he spoke, and his hand trembled slightly as he raised his glass. He was hiding something. He tried questioning LeBeau's accountant, a nervous man named Mr. Abernathy, but Abernathy clammed up immediately, citing client confidentiality. "I can disclose any information about Mr. LeBeau's finances," he stammered. "I could lose my license." Every lead turned into a dead end, shrouded in lies and evasions. Everyone seemed to know something, but no one was willing to talk. Leo felt like he was hitting a wall, surrounded by a network of deceit. The call came as he was grabbing a late-night coffee, his burner phone, the one he used for sensitive cases. He almost didn't answer it. Maxwell, a distorted voice, rasped on the other end, heavily filtered to conceal its identity. "You are digging where you shouldn't be, back off, or you regret it." "Who is this?" Leo demanded, his hand tightening around his coffee cup. The voice chuckled, a chilling, hollow sound. "Let's just say I know things about you, Maxwell. Things you'd rather keep buried. Things about a certain fugitive, a certain Sarah Miller. Remember her?" Leo's blood ran cold. Sarah, how did they know about her? It had been years, a secret he guarded fiercely. "Stay away from the LeBeau case, Maxwell. For your own good, and don't bother looking for him. You won't like what you find." The line went dead. Leo stared at the phone, his hand trembling. Someone was playing a dangerous game. They knew his past, his weaknesses, and they were using them to control him. He was cornered, trapped. He finished his coffee in silence, the taste suddenly bitter. A wave of fear washed over him, more potent than anything he felt in years. He spent his life chasing shadows, but now the shadows were chasing him. He knew what he had to do. He needed to find out who was behind the threats, who was pulling the strings, but he was running out of time. Just as he was leaving the diner, his phone buzzed again. It was Tony Calogero. "Maxwell, where is he?" Tony's voice was cold, devoid of any pretense of politeness. "I am working on it. Tony, I am following leads. Leads, I don't care about leads, I care about results. Simone is getting frantic, and frankly, my patience is wearing thin. I need Jack LeBeau found, and I need him found 20 now. Or I promise you, Maxwell, you are going to wish you never heard the name." "What are you suggesting, Tony?" Leo asked, his voice dangerously low. "I am suggesting you understand the consequences of failure, and I am suggesting that if LeBeau doesn't surface by the end of the week, I'll start collecting from you. Every penny. I'll take everything you own. You understand?" Leo hung up the phone, his hands clenched into fists. He was caught between a ruthless criminal organization, a web of deceit, and a shadowy figure who knew his darkest secrets. The magnolia blossom, a symbol of beauty and resilience, suddenly felt like a harbinger of doom. He was walking a tightrope, and the fall would be catastrophic. He had a feeling he just looking for a missing man anymore. He was looking for a way to save himself. The anonymous call had fractured Leo's resolve. It wasn't just about his career or even his life anymore. It was about Sarah. The ghost he'd tried to lay to rest had been resurrected, weaponized against him. He needed to know how much the caller knew and what they intended to do with it. He sat in his darkened office, the rain drumming a relentless rhythm against the window. His burner phone rang again. He hesitated, then answered. "You're surprisingly predictable, Maxwell," the distorted voice said, laced with amusement. "So eager to know what we know. Let's just say Daniel Miller wasn't running from the law alone. He had a benefactor, a silent partner, Salvatore Sal Bellini. Ever heard of him?" Sal Bellini, the name landed like a punch to the gut. Bellini was a lieutenant in Big Tony Caligero's organization, known for his brutal efficiency and unwavering loyalty. "What did Bellini have to do with it?" Leo asked, his voice strained. "He provided Daniel with transportation, a safe house, a little encouragement. He ensured Daniel stayed off the grid. And when Daniel ended up at the bottom of the river, Bellini made sure the investigation went nowhere." The caller paused, allowing the information to sink in. A few well-placed bribes, a few conveniently lost pieces of evidence. The right people greased. It is amazing what money can buy, isn't it? And the best part, you were too naive, too eager to prove yourself, to see it. You just accepted the official story. Leo felt a cold fury rising within him. He'd been a pawn, manipulated by forces far beyond his understanding. His failure wasn't just his own, it was orchestrated. "You want me off the LeBeau's case, don't you?" he said, his voice barely a whisper. "We want you to understand the consequences of poking around where you don't belong. Some doors are best left closed, Maxwell. Some secrets are best left buried." The line went dead again. He needed to verify the caller's claims. He started digging into the old case files, combing through police reports, witness statements, anything he could find. It didn't take long to uncover a pattern of irregularities. Key pieces of evidence had disappeared. Witnesses had recanted their statements. The investigation had been deliberately stifled. And at the center of it all, subtly but undeniably, was Detective Raymond Holt. Holt had been the lead investigator on the Miller case. Now a veteran detective with a stellar reputation, Holt was respected within the department and untouchable. He was also known to have close ties to Big Tony Caligero. Leo requested a meeting with Holt, posing as a freelance investigator looking into cold cases. The meeting was tense from the start. Holt was dismissive, condescending, and clearly uncomfortable with Leo's questions. "The Miller case was closed years ago, Mr. Maxwell," Holt said, his voice flat. "The evidence pointed to a suicide, a tragic end to a desperate man. But there were inconsistencies," Leo pressed. "Missing evidence, recanted statements." Holt's eyes narrowed. "You're wasting your time, Mr. Maxwell. And frankly, you're starting to annoy me. I suggest you find a more productive way to spend your energy." "Are you saying you deliberately hindered the investigation?" Leo asked, pushing his luck. Holt's jaw tightened. "I'm saying you're a busybody who needs to stay out of things that don't concern him. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have real police work to do." He stood up, dismissing Leo with a wave of his hand. Leo knew he'd hit a nerve. Holt was protecting someone, and he was willing to do whatever it took to keep the truth hidden. He needed help. He found it in Evangeline Evie Rousseau, a freelance journalist known for her investigative prowess and relentless pursuit of the truth. Evie was skeptical at first, dismissing Leo as a desperate private investigator with a flair for melodrama. But when he showed her the evidence, the coded note, the forged paintings, the inconsistencies in the Miller case, she started to take notice. "This is bigger than a missing person, isn't it?" she said, her dark eyes gleaming with excitement. "This is about corruption, art fraud, and a network that reaches into the highest levels of this city. And someone is willing to do anything to keep it hidden," Leo added. Evie agreed to help, drawn in by the challenge and the potential for a career-making story. She had connections within the local media, access to sources Leo couldn't reach. Together, they formed an unlikely alliance, bound by a shared pursuit of the truth. Slick Rick DeMarco hadn't disappeared. He'd simply shifted his tactics. He began spreading rumors about Leo around the city, whispering about his gambling debts, his troubled past, his questionable methods. He even approached Simone LeBeau, suggesting Leo was incompetent and untrustworthy. "He is the wrong man for the job, Mrs. LeBeau," DeMarco had told her, oozing false concern. "He is a desperate man grasping at straws. You deserve someone who can actually find your husband." Leo heard about the rumors through the grapevine. DeMarco was systematically dismantling his reputation, isolating him from potential clients. He was playing a dangerous game, and Leo knew he wouldn't stop until he'd driven him out of business. Evie, meanwhile, was making progress. She'd been digging into LeBeau's financial records, tracing the flow of money through his shell corporations. She came to him late that night, her eyes wide with revelation. "I think I found something," she said. Her voice hushed. LeBeau wasn't just moving forgeries. He was laundering money for someone. A lot of money, and it all leads back to Arthur Beaumont. Arthur Beaumont, the name was synonymous with philanthropy in New Orleans. A wealthy businessman, a patron of the arts, a pillar of the community. He funded hospitals, museums, and countless charitable organizations. He was untouchable, Beaumont, Leo said, stunned. "What has he got to do with this?" "He is a major collector of art," Evie explained. "He is also known to be discreet. I found several transactions linking LeBeau's shell corporations to Beaumont's offshore accounts. And the money, it matches the estimated value of the forged paintings." She held up a document, a scanned copy of a wire transfer. The amount was staggering. LeBeau was selling Beaumont forgeries, washing the money through his properties. But why? And what was Beaumont using the money for? Suddenly, Leo remembered something. A small detail from his initial interview with Simone LeBeau. She'd mentioned that her husband had been unusually secretive in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. He'd been receiving frequent phone calls from an unknown number. A seed of dread began to sprout in Leo's mind. He'd been so focused on the art fraud he'd overlooked the obvious. Simone LeBeau hadn't just stumbled into this mess. He'd been actively involved, and now he was gone. As Evie laid out the evidence, Leo's phone rang. It was the anonymous caller. He hesitated, then answered. "Enjoying the investigation, Maxwell," the distorted voice rasped. "It is cute how you think you're uncovering something new. Let me give you a little reminder of who you're dealing with. That Sarah Miller you tried so hard to save, her brother Danny. He works for Calogero now, and he is very interested in your activities." The voice paused, then added a chillingly soft threat. "Back off, Maxwell, or I'll share some information with the press. Some information about your heroic attempts to find Sarah. Some information about your failures. Wouldn't want that past to resurface, would you?" The line went dead. Leo stared at his phone, his knuckles white. He glanced at Evie, her face a mask of concern. He'd lost control of the narrative. He was a pawn, trapped in a game he didn't understand, being manipulated by forces he couldn't comprehend. And now, his past was coming back to haunt him, threatening to destroy everything he'd worked for. His life, his reputation, even his soul were all on the line. The Beaumont estate was a Gothic monstrosity, looming over the murky waters of the bayou like a decaying sentinel. Spanish moss draped from ancient oaks, obscuring the house in a perpetual twilight. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum. "This is where the money trail ends," Evie said, her voice barely a whisper. "Devereaux owns the property under a shell corporation. No one's lived here in years, but the security system is state-of-the-art." Leo checked his Glock, the metal cold against his palm. He felt a growing sense of dread. Everything about this place screamed danger. "Let's go," he said, his voice tight. "But stick close." They bypassed the security gate by exploiting a blind spot Evie had discovered through satellite imagery. The house was silent, unnervingly so. They moved cautiously through the overgrown gardens, their senses on high alert. The air hung heavy with the smell of damp earth and decay. Inside, the house was a labyrinth of dark corridors and opulent rooms, filled with antique furniture and priceless artwork. Mostly forgeries, Evie suspected. They found Devereaux in the library, surrounded by paintings and stacks of documents. He was calmly sipping brandy as if expecting guests. "Mr. Maxwell, Ms. Rousseau," he said, his voice smooth and unruffled. "I must say, I'm disappointed. I was hoping you'd stay out of this." "Where is LeBeau?" Leo demanded, his hand tightening on his weapon. Devereaux chuckled. "Jacques, oh, he is. indisposed. Let's just say he became a liability. He knew too much, he started asking questions. You had him kidnapped, Evie asked, her voice trembling with anger. Kidnapped is such a harsh word. Let's just say I persuaded him to take an extended vacation. Somewhere he won't be bothered. He gestured towards a large painting, a forgery of a Monet water lily. You see, it all started simply enough, a few well-placed forgeries. A discreet clientele, then Jack got greedy. He wanted a bigger cut. He threatened to go to the authorities. So you silenced him, Leo said, his voice low and menacing. Necessity, Mr. Maxwell, pure necessity. A man must protect his investments. Devereaux set down his brandy glass, his eyes hardening. And now, you both become a threat. I'm afraid I can't allow that. He snapped his fingers, and two burly men emerged from the shadows, armed with automatic weapons. The room suddenly felt suffocating, the air thick with tension. I underestimated you, Maxwell, Devereaux said, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. But it is a mistake I won't make again. Before Leo could react, a chorus of familiar, unwelcome voices echoed through the house. Well, look what we have here. Tony Calogero swaggered into the library, flanked by his usual entourage of menacing enforcers. He grinned, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Devereaux, my friend, always a pleasure. And Maxwell, what a surprise. Leo's blood ran cold. He realized he'd walked into a carefully orchestrated trap. You knew? Evie asked, her voice trembling. Of course I knew, Calogero said, chuckling. Devereaux and I have been partners for years. He handles the art, I handle the logistics, maintaining discretion, shall we say. You're both going to jail, Leo said, his voice strained. Calogero laughed, a booming sound that filled the room. You're in no position to make threats, Maxwell. You've poked your nose into things that don't concern you, and now you're going to pay the price. He gestured towards his enforcers. Take them out. Chaos erupted. Gunfire ripped through the library, shattering windows and tearing through furniture. Leo and Evie dived for cover, scrambling behind a massive mahogany desk. Bullets whizzed past their heads, splintering wood and sending dust billowing into the air. Leo returned fire, his Glock barking in response. He took down one of Calogero's enforcers, but there were too many of them. They were pinned down, outnumbered, and outgunned. Evie, despite her fear, was surprisingly composed. She was relaying the situation to the authorities, providing a detailed account of the shootout and the identities of the perpetrators. I've contacted the police, Leo, she shouted over the din of gunfire. They're on their way, but it'll take time. The shootout raged on. A brutal ballet of violence and desperation. Leo and Evie fought back with everything they had, but they were slowly being overwhelmed. Suddenly, Devereaux seized the opportunity. While Leo and Evie were engaged in a fierce firefight with Calogero's men, he slipped out the back, grabbing a laptop from his desk. The laptop contained the digital files sooty the evidence of the art fraud, the offshore accounts, the names of the corrupt officials involved. He is getting away, Evie screamed, spotting Devereaux disappearing into the shadows. Leo tried to pursue him, but a bullet grazed his shoulder, sending a searing pain through his arm. He stumbled, falling to the floor. Leo, Evie cried, firing at Calogero's enforcers who were closing in. The gunfire subsided as quickly as it had begun. Calogero's men had secured the room, forcing Leo and Evie into a corner. Leo lay on the floor, clutching his wounded shoulder, his vision blurring. Calogero stood over him, a smug grin on his face. Looks like this is the end of the line, Maxwell. You should have stayed out of this. You're not going to get away with this, Leo managed to say, his voice weak. Oh, I think I am, Calogero replied, his eyes gleaming with malice. Devereaux is already gone. He has the evidence. And as for you, well, you've made a lot of enemies. No one will miss you. He nodded to his enforcers. Take care of him. Evie screamed, throwing herself at Calogero's enforcers, but she was quickly subdued. As Calogero's men moved towards him, Leo closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable. He'd failed, he'd been outmaneuvered, betrayed, and left to face the consequences. He'd failed to save LeBeau's, failed to expose the truth, and now he was about to pay the ultimate price. He opened his eyes one last time, catching a glimpse of Evie's desperate face before darkness consumed him. Devereaux was gone, the evidence with him, and Calogero, bathed in the sinister light of the bayou, had won for now. The pain was a white-hot brand searing across Leo's shoulder, but adrenaline kept him moving. Calogero had underestimated him, assuming a grazed shoulder meant he was finished. He'd been wrong. The years spent on the streets, the instincts honed by desperation, wouldn't let him give up. As Calogero's enforcers approached, Leo feigned unconsciousness. When they got close, he unleashed a flurry of strikes, utilizing the close-quarters combat training from his Marine days. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. He disarmed one, used another as a shield, and sent the third sprawling with a brutal elbow to the face. The chaos bought Evie enough time to break free, grabbing a discarded weapon and joining the fray together. They managed to subdue Calogero's remaining men, turning the tables on the would-be captors. "You really are a stubborn son of a bitch, Maxwell," Calogero growled. His face contorted with rage as Evie forced a pair of handcuffs onto his wrists. "Just call it a professional courtesy," Leo rasped, wincing as he leaned against a wall for support. "Now where is LeBeau?" Calogero smirked. "Oh, he is quite comfortable. Enjoying a little cruise." He spat on the floor. "On the Four-Belle Revue, my little pleasure boat." The Ville Revue was a vintage steamboat, a relic of a bygone era, currently docked at a secluded pier just outside the city. It was Calogero's private escape, a floating casino and illicit gambling den. Leo and Evie, with a contingent of local police in tow alerted by Evie's earlier call, stormed the vessel. The steamboat was surprisingly crowded, filled with high rollers and dubious characters. A jazz band played a mournful tune, attempting to maintain a semblance of normalcy amid the chaos. The arrest of Calogero and his associates sent shockwaves through the crowd, but the show, surprisingly, went on. They found LeBeau chained in the engine room, weak and dehydrated but alive. He'd been guarded by two of Calogero's enforcers, who surrendered without a fight. "Thank God you came," LeBeau whispered, his voice raspy. "Devereaux, he is the mastermind. The art fraud is just a front. He is using the money to fund something else, something bigger. Offshore accounts, hidden in the Caymans. He has a network of contacts, powerful people protecting him." He rattled off a series of account numbers, names, and shell corporations. It was a treasure trove of information, enough to unravel the entire conspiracy. Devereaux was planning to disappear, to start a new life with the money, LeBeau continued. He was going to skip town tonight. The arrests were swift and decisive. Calogero and dozens of corrupt officials were taken into custody, their network of deceit finally exposed. The local media descended on the scene. Eager to report on the scandal, Evie, naturally, was in her element, providing insightful commentary and promising a full exposé. "This is a watershed moment for New Orleans," she told a reporter, her eyes blazing with righteous indignation. "We've uncovered a deep-seated conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of power. The truth will finally come out." But Devereaux was gone. He'd vanished into the night, leaving only a trail of unanswered questions and a growing sense of unease. Leo and Evie knew he wouldn't give up easily. He was a master manipulator, a cunning strategist, and he had a lot to lose. Their pursuit led them to a dilapidated jazz club on the outskirts of the French Quarter, a forgotten relic of a bygone era known as the Blue Moon. It was a place where shadows lingered and secrets thrived. The club was deserted, the only sound the mournful echo of a distant trumpet. "He is here," Leo said, his senses on high alert. "I can feel it." They moved cautiously through the darkened club, their weapons drawn. The air hung heavy with the scent of stale beer and regret. They found Devereaux in the back room, surrounded by a handful of armed guards. He was packing a suitcase, preparing to flee the country. "Looks like we found him," Evie said, her voice tight. "Too late," Devereaux said, a sinister smile playing on his lips. "You think you've won, you've barely scratched the surface. You're about to find out that there are things far more dangerous than art fraud." He gestured to his guards, who opened fire. A chaotic shootout erupted, the sound of gunshots echoing through the empty club. Leo and Evie returned fire, taking cover behind overturned tables and chairs. Leo managed to disarm two of Devereaux's guards, but the odds were still stacked against them. Devereaux was using them as a distraction, buying himself time to escape. Just as Leo was about to corner Devereaux, the man stopped, a chillingly calm expression on his face. "You think you know everything, Maxwell," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you've saved the day, you're a fool." He paused and then dropped a bombshell. "Evangeline Rousseau, she is not who you think she is. She is not a journalist, she is family. My niece, actually." Leo froze, his mind reeling. Evie, Devereux's niece. It couldn't be true. He turned to look at her, his eyes searching for answers. Evie's face had gone pale. She avoided his gaze, her lips trembling. "It is complicated," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Devereux laughed, a cold, triumphant sound. "Complicated? Oh, it is much more than complicated. Evie has been feeding me information all along. She helped me cover my tracks, mislead the authorities. She has been playing you, Maxwell, all of you." He turned and made a dash for the back exit, leaving Leo and Evie standing in stunned silence. The truth had shattered everything, leaving Leo questioning everything he thought he knew. Had he been a pawn in a much larger game? Had he been manipulated by the one person he thought he could trust? He watched as Devereux disappeared into the darkness, and a terrible realization dawned on him. The river of reckoning had just begun to flow. The revelation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Evie, Devereux's niece, a planted mole. It felt impossibly cruel, a betrayal that cut deeper than any bullet wound. Leo's initial reaction was disbelief, followed by a searing wave of anger. But gazing at Evie's face, etched with shame and regret, he saw something beyond deception, phoning a desperate attempt at redemption. "It is true," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "My name wasn't always Evangeline Rousseau. I used to be Isabelle Moreau. I ran from him, from this life. I changed my identity, tried to disappear." Devereux, momentarily forgotten, was futilely trying to disappear through a back exit, but Leo's gaze remained fixed on Evie. "Why?" he asked, his voice tight. "My mother, she worked for him. She discovered some of his illegal activities and threatened to expose him. He silenced her. I was young, terrified. I ran hoping to escape his reach. But he found me, manipulated me, used my fear to control me. She swallowed hard. He promised to protect me, to give me a new life, if I did what he asked. I told myself I was just gathering information, that I'd eventually expose him, but it just spiraled out of control." Leo studied her carefully, searching for any sign of deceit. He saw only pain and a flicker of defiance. He remembered his own past failures, the innocent people he'd been unable to save. He knew what it was like to be haunted by regret. "You helped him for years," he said, his voice softening. "How could you?" "I was weak," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I was scared. I thought I could outsmart him, but he always stayed one step ahead. Then I met you, and I started to believe I could actually make a difference. I wanted to help bring him down, to atone for my mistakes." He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "You did help me. You gave me the leads I needed, even if it wasn't your intention." Devereux had almost reached the back door. "Enough with the melodrama," he shouted. "This doesn't concern you, Maxwell. Stay out of this." Ignoring him, Leo turned his attention back to their fugitive. He burst through the exit, finding Devereux scrambling into a waiting car. A quick tackle and a brutal struggle followed. Devereux was surprisingly strong, but Leo was fueled by righteous fury and a desperate need for closure. He subdued him, pinning him to the ground, and retrieved the stolen funds. A briefcase filled with cash and bearer bonds hidden in the trunk of the car. "It is over, Devereux," Leo said, his voice hard. "It is finally over." The authorities arrived moments later, sirens wailing in the night. Devereux was taken into custody, finally facing justice for his crimes. Evie, after providing a full statement, was granted immunity in exchange for her cooperation. The aftermath was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media scrutiny, and bureaucratic red tape. Leo testified before a grand jury, providing evidence that led to the indictment of several corrupt officials. The stolen funds were recovered and returned to their rightful owners. He even managed to salvage his private investigation business, though the experience had left him shaken and disillusioned. He realized he'd been chasing the wrong things, fighting the money, the thrill of the chase, the illusion of control. Gambling had become a crutch, a way to numb the pain of his past failures. It was time to let go. He sold his remaining book of bonds, the last vestige of his self-destructive habits, and use the money to invest in a more sustainable future. He downsized his office, hired a reliable secretary, and vowed to focus on quality investigations, not quick profits. Weeks later, Leo found himself sitting in his newly renovated office, a small but comfortable space. He was reviewing files for a new case of missing person, this time a young woman who'd vanished without a trace. A tentative smile on her face. She'd officially changed her name back to Evangeline Rousseau, reclaiming her identity and starting anew. She carried a file folder, offering it to Leo. "I did some digging," she said. "I think I found a lead in the missing person case, a possible connection to a local smuggling ring." Leo took the folder, a flicker of hope igniting within him. He looked up at Evie, her eyes shining with determination. "You know, you're a pretty good investigator," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "I have a good teacher," she replied, returning his smile. They spent the evening poring over the files, brainstorming leads, and piecing together the puzzle. It felt right, a partnership built on trust, shared purpose, and a mutual desire for justice. As they worked, Leo noticed a car slowly driving past his office, its windows tinted. A shadowy figure sat inside, watching them intently. He couldn't make out their features, but he felt a prickle of unease. "Someone is watching us," he murmured, his hand instinctively reaching for the Glock tucked under his desk. Evie froze, her eyes widening with apprehension. She'd felt it too. Their work was far from over. The river of reckoning might have calmed, but the currents still ran deep. They'd struck a blow against the darkness, but they knew they'd made enemies, and those enemies wouldn't rest until they had their revenge. The game wasn't over, it had just begun.